Well, my clock says it's 10:30. So I made a copy of the opening prayer because I think last week some of you were having a hard time reading it off the screen. So just hang on to it, if you will, because we'll use it every time we meet. So if you will join me in praying that prayer together, we'll begin. May the God of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of glory, give us the spirit of wisdom and understanding as we continue this Lenten Bible study. Open our hearts to the knowledge of Him. Open our eyes to the wisdom of Him. And may the words of wisdom that are revealed to us in the Holy Scripture enlighten us, that we may know what is the hope and glorious inheritance to which He has called us. Amen. A little bit of housekeeping. I sent this class list around last week, but I'm going to do it again. So if your name is on there, just put your initials by it so that I know that's, because I don't know all of you yet, okay? So I'll pass this around. Unfortunately, when I stapled it, I made a mistake. First mistake I've ever made. No, actually the second. I was wrong one time and I thought it was right. I was right one time and I thought it was wrong. I have an agenda that we're going to try to follow today. And usually there's always what I call leftovers from the previous week. And last week I didn't say this, but questions. The only dumb question is a question that doesn't get asked, okay? So I encourage you to ask questions. We have a lot of expertise in this room. Father Tom over here, how many years a priest?
How many years? 62, I think.
62?
Wow.
Well, it's actually 64. Is that 62? What is it?
I can't do math in my head, Tom. Yeah. It's a long time. So let's say 50 years.
60, I think.
Okay, Reverend Judy, he's got 25 years, okay. Father Warren, I don't know how many years he's a priest, but I'm guessing in the 20s, maybe 30s, huh? So we got a lot of expertise. I'll throw in my 26 years as a deacon, and then I think between the four of us, we probably could answer most any question you might have. But if we can't, we'll figure it out and get an answer, okay? One thing I realized as I've been preparing for this teaching wisdom literature is like trying to boil the ocean with a candle. It's pretty hard to do in 6 sessions, okay? So what we're getting is kind of the water skiing, okay? We're going to go over the top of these things, and hopefully once we do that, you'll be able to go back and reread the literature, and it'll make more sense, all right? Anybody have an opportunity to impress your friends by saying you were taking a class on sapiential wisdom literature in the Bible? Anybody? Edna, good for you. Well, I did too. Yeah. And Dave, we had friends come down from Oro Valley, and she's a Southern Baptist from Tennessee. And she was interested in what I was doing for Bible study, and I said, well, I'm teaching a class on the sapiential literature of the Bible. And she went, what? I said, well, it's wisdom literature. Oh, okay, you mean like the wisdom of Solomon? I said, yeah, that's one of them, okay. So we're going to have a little review this morning before we get started, because I know you're all looking forward to this group of players that we have up here that are going to come and act out part of Job, okay, this morning. What's the main purpose of wisdom literature? What's the number one reason for wisdom literature in the Bible? Instruction. Remember that. The wisdom literature is really there for instruction. It teaches us how to be a better parent, a better father, a better mother, a better child, how to live with each other in society, all right? So it's there for instruction. What book in the Bible has the first wisdom literature in it? Genesis. Good for you. Chapter 2 of Genesis, the second creation story, when Adam and Eve are trying to have divine wisdom like God, all right? And God says, I'm not going to have none of that, and he shows them the door, okay? Out the door they go. There's Reverend Judy with some Bibles, so appreciate that. All right, let's see if we can do this one. What are the wisdom or sapiential books of the Bible? What's the one we're studying now? Job. What are the other wisdom literature? Wisdom of Solomon. Yep. Proverbs. We're going to probably look at Proverbs next week, okay? What other ones? Ecclesiastes or Koheleth, okay? The most cynical book in the Bible, all right? What other ones? There's the two Apocrypha books. Sirach, the book of Sirach, which is an Apocrypha book, and the actually Wisdom of Solomon is an Apocrypha book too, okay? And then there's the Song of Songs. So there are 6 wisdom books in the Bible. What about wisdom literature? Not books, but wisdom literature. Where do we find wisdom literature? Psalms. Some psalms are wisdom psalms, right? What else? Parables of Jesus. All the parables of Jesus are considered wisdom literature. And it makes sense.
Sure.
Because parables, when Jesus taught the parables, he was doing it to instruct people, okay? What else? One other thing that Jesus did. Matthew. Sermon on the Mount. Right. That's considered wisdom literature, and then parts of Daniel are also considered wisdom literature. So that's all the things that we covered last week. So what's the plan for the day? Well, I just want to talk a little bit about Bibles, because I didn't do it last week. I have what's called, no, I don't have actually. My Bible is at home. Because the Bible that I'm using has my wife's name on it. And there's a story behind this. She picked it up at a book sale here at St. Francis.
Wow.
For a whole dollar. And we brought it home. And what do you suppose I said to her? What do we need with another Bible in this house? Right? Well, guess what? This is my favorite Bible, okay? This is what's called it's a Woman of Faith Study Bible. It's a New International Version, which means it doesn't have the Apocrypha. That's probably the only downside to it. But it's a wonderful Bible because if I could show you the pages, it has the text, it has commentary, and then it has cross-reference to all of the other Bible passages that there are that relate to that particular verse. So you could spend hours reading it and reading the cross-references, and it would probably take you a year to get through Job. Okay?
Yes.
It's a wonderful Bible. Now, if you look at the back side of the prayer that we just did, this is from my first Bible that I use, which is has the Apocrypha in it. But this Bible is annotated. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at, I've got 19 circled there. You see that? Blessed be Abram, by God Most High. And then I got a line drawn down to 14:19. That's more commentary about that particular text in the Bible. It's called an annotated Bible. And they're very good Bibles. There's nothing wrong with them. And then if you pop up, you'll see there's a C after the word words, and then it points to a C, and that C has Psalm 110, Hebrews 5:6. That's a cross-reference to other passages in the Bible. So, if you want an annotated Bible, then you get one like this. If you want a study Bible, you get one like this, okay? They're both good. They both offer a lot of good information, all right? So, you know, I ate a little bit of crow. My wife said, you can use that Bible, you can write in it, you can do whatever you want with it, and that's what I'm doing. Okay? Anyhow, that's a story about Bibles, all right? Any questions? Comments? Okay. I think I promised you last week, make sure we're at that point. Here's the plan of action today, okay? We've got some people who volunteered to go through this Job play that I put together. And there's a reason and a purpose for the way I'm doing this, okay? I figure if we do the play, you're going to understand the flow of Job, right? And then when we get in to read the real text, hopefully it's going to make more sense to you. At least it does to me, okay? Because that's how I learn, right? But it may not to you, but we'll figure it out, okay? So I lost this sheet that I had all the people on there for God and Job and Job's wife, Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar and Elihu. So you're on your honor, okay? If you signed up last week, please come to the front, all right?
Video.
And I'm going to... Excuse me?
It is on video, so we know who they were.
Well, do you have it available?
No, you do, but they'll be on.
Okay. Now, the character of Job is going to be played by Dave Dunn, and originally we had planned that I was going to put some face paint on Dave, and then I changed my mind because some people have sensitive skin, and I didn't know if the stuff that I was using would be a problem. So we'll just pretend Job has blotches all over. Okay? So you got to come up here, all right? All you characters, and I'm going to get a chair for Job, and the rest of you stand around him, all right? Because you're the ones that are going to question him. Job, you get a staff.
Oh, I get a staff.
Yeah, you get a staff. And God, where's God? Reverend Judy, you're God.
Well, I wasn't prepared for it. So.
He wasn't
I
here.
wasn't here.
He was,
I'll get even.
and you get a staff too. Okay?
I never had a staff when I was rector of the church.
Well, I was going to get you a lighter, but I couldn't find one. Oh, gee whiz. So we got to have Job's chair. Pretend like this is ashes. Yeah, this is the ashes. Okay. All right. And you all need your copy of Job. If you don't have it, I have extra copies. Okay.
Mike, do you have another one?
Yeah, where you at? There you are. I don't have directional hearing, so when you talk to me. All right. Maybe some of you can gather in here. I'll step aside. All right. We're going to follow this script. And you got to go into the third page where it says, here's another version of the story of Job. The names are the same. I got a grammatical error here. There is some quotes. No, there are some quotes from the text of Job. But most of the text is my version of the story of Job, told in prose, not poetry. It begins by Job's wife speaking after he has been afflicted with sores. Now remember, here is what we know so far. We read this last week. God and Satan know this is a test. All right? That they're doing a test of Job to test his faith. Job does not know it's a test. Okay? But Job knows that he's innocent. And he's not going to admit to being guilty, no matter what. Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, don't know it's a test, but they believe that Job is guilty. Elihu believes Job is guilty, but he believes he speaks with divine inspiration, and he wants to convince Job that sometimes a gracious God uses suffering to restore rather than punish. But his bombastic style shows that he lacks the wisdom he thinks he has. All right? Now, I'm going to play the role of the narrator. And before we get started, although Job never invokes the covenant with Noah in the text, Job knows that the covenant with Noah meant that there would no longer be an immediate punishment for sin by God, like had happened to Adam and Eve. God would not rain down suffering on his people. People would create their own suffering. That is why he is confused by God being the cause of his suffering. So that's sort of setting the stage for what we're now going to do. All right? Players, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, we have a microphone here for these people. You got one there, and there's one more. Let's grab that, okay? All right. Here we go.
This could be difficult, holding this.
You know, Mary,
I don't know how that works.
oh, nothing. Pick it up. That's good.
I don't know how they work.
I'm complimenting you for playing the part, the role, okay? I was trying to look for sackcloth. It's not on yet. It's on standby. Well, it's red. I wonder if the batteries are gone.
Oh, if it's red, the batteries are gone.
Yeah.
Are you still listening? No. Are you still holding on to your integrity? Curse God and die.
You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept God from God and not trouble?
Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, have heard of Job's troubles and have come to comfort him and sympathize with him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. They then did what was the custom. They sat sitting Sheba in silence for Job for 7 days. Think about that. Sitting in silence for 7 days. Who can do that? Me, okay? It does beg a question before we continue. Were these friends that came to see Job in his troubles, are they expressing sympathy, empathy, or compassion?
They're mourning.
They're mourning. Okay, but is it sympathy, empathy, or compassion?
Is it all of them?
This is not a trick question, by the way.
Sympathy?
Sympathy, yeah, they're expressing their sympathy. And if they're expressing empathy, they're actually feeling how Job is feeling, right? And then the next step would be compassion, would be to help Job in some way. And we can apply that to our own lives, right? When somebody's having issues, are we expressing sympathy, empathy, or compassion? Empathy allows us to suffer with the person. I was never able to actually do that until I became a deacon. I was told I didn't have much feelings for other people. But I actually got to the point where when one of our parishioners came in to tell me that her cancer came back, I actually began to cry with her. That's empathy, okay? In silence, they sit in silence for 7 days, and after 7 days, Job speaks.
I curse the day I was born. May it be dark forever, and may no light shine upon it. Why did I not perish at birth? Why was there a midwife there to catch me? Why are the suffering allowed to live? Why was I born? Why was I not buried at birth like a stillborn child? It would have been better if I had been left to die.
Job's friends are convinced that Job has committed a terrible sin, and that is the cause of Job's troubles. They are convinced that if Job confesses, he will be saved from his troubles. But Job has done nothing wrong and won't confess to something he has not done. First, to try to get Job to confess is Eliphaz.
You should be cursing God, not the midwife. God is the one who has taken away your property, your livestock, your family, and now made your body full of sores. Think, Job, think. There must be something you have done for God to punish you with so much suffering. You have had a good life and been good to people. You have more riches than anyone could expect in this life. But now that you are suffering, you curse the day you were born. But people reap what they sow, and if you have offended God, then you must confess to what you have done. I had a dream, and in the dream I saw a man who was suffering like you are now, and I saw a wicked demon told me that this man's suffering would stop if he confessed his sin. If he refused, more harm would come to him. When the man confessed, he was left alone, and his suffering stopped. That man in my dream was you, Job. Admit it, Job, before it is too late, and God punishes you even more. If I were in your shoes, I would appeal to God for help, get on my knees, and ask God for forgiveness for my sins, and plead for the Almighty's mercy. If you do this, God will surely forgive you and relieve you of your suffering, and bless your life with riches, and you will prosper once again. This may be a test, but why would God test you? Maybe it is because every person makes mistakes, and we all fail the Almighty in what we do or don't do. Admit to your mistakes and ask God for forgiveness, and then your suffering will end. Do it, Job, before it is too late. What good is your life as it is now? What do you have to say to God? Do it. Say to God what God needs to hear. Do it now.
If my suffering could be put on a scale, it would surely outweigh the sands of the seas. Why, Eliphaz, are you judging me? Why are you not having compassion for what I am feeling and suffering? Instead, you accuse me of being sinful and being punished for my sins. You are making my suffering more intense by what you are saying to me. If I have to continue the suffering, I would rather die and be taken to Sheol. What good is living here in the state I am in? I have done no wrong, and yet you strike me with poison arrows. Why? You are like the white of an egg, totally tasteless and of no value to me. I will not drink of your poison.
Now it's Bildad's turn. Maybe he can get Job to confess.
How long will you deny your failings? Your righteousness is a bruise, and you are being punished for it. The only way out is to beg God for forgiveness, and He will restore you to your rightful place. If you are not blameless, as you say you are, then God will not reject you. If you confess, God will rescue you from these 6 calamities: famine,
stroke of the sword, lash of the tongue, destruction, beasts of the earth, and from the clutches of the powerful. Your children will be many, and your descendants like the grass of the earth.
How can a mortal like me be righteous before God? God is all-knowing, all-powerful. He can make mountains move and make the sun grow dim and not shine. How can I have a dispute with Him and win? Let me plead my case with Him. If I plead for mercy, maybe He will hear me. Though I am innocent, will He rule against me, and will I have to suffer for the rest of my years?
Eliphaz and Bildad had failed to get Job to confess. Now it's Zophar's turn. Will he get the job done?
You say that your beliefs are solid, but you are a fool. God knows what it is in a person's heart, and you will be judged accordingly. How I
Stop,
wish-
stop a minute, Jenny, I want to get you the microphone. Yeah.
I'll start over. That's what I was talking about.
I can hear you.
I'll start. Okay. You say that your beliefs are solid, but you are a fool. God knows what is in a person's heart, and you will be judged accordingly. How I wish God would speak to you and show you his wisdom. Maybe then you would see what you have done wrong and confess your sin. God recognizes evil when God sees it. But if you do the right thing, God is duty-bound to forgive you and restore your health.
After 2 more rounds with Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, Job is still not convinced he has done anything wrong. Now a 4th friend appears, Elihu, and he is the closer of the sales company who comes in after the salesperson has been with the client for 6 hours and still has not been able to close the deal. Even though he is young, he's convinced that he can make Job admit to what he has done.
Okay, time
But
out.
just a minute. Let's get the microphone to him. Who has the microphone? Oh, thank you. All right.
Okay, time out. I have been silent and have not spoken since I am young, but I wanted to wait until I heard what you all had to say. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, you are all fools. Strike me down, my elders, for speaking to you in this tone. But you have not made Job admit to his wrongdoing, or provided him wrong, or proved him wrong. You did nothing to answer his arguments. I will take over now and get the job done. I may be younger than any of you, and you might say I do not have the wisdom to deal in such matters as these. But I know God's mind, and I have been inspired by God to know what is going on here, and I will get Job to admit what he has done, and he will be pleading for mercy from me, not God, when I am finished. You may go now. Your service here is over. Job, listen to me. I am on your side, and I want to help you. But let me tell how this works. Sin harms us and offends God, but it does not harm God. Sin harms the one who sins and brings suffering to that person. The greater the sin, the greater the suffering from God. You have said that you are pure and clean and without guilt. But where is your proof? You have none. But God can cause the innocent to suffer too, sometimes to restore rather than to punish. You invoke the covenant with Noah, but you have misinterpreted that covenant by believing God is not the cause of suffering. God promised Noah that he, God, would not destroy all of his creation again by a great flood. But the covenant did not say God would not stop punishing people for their sins. God does not create evil, but God punishes those who do evil. I believe you are a good person, and I want to help you. But you are a stupid fool to think you can hide your sin or sins from God and not be punished. When you had everything a man can have, what did you do with your wealth? You kept what you had and accumulated even more. Did you share with others? Did you love your wealth more than God? Maybe that is why God is punishing you. You want to put God on trial, but it is you who is on trial, and you will have your day in court once you confess to your sins. You don't seem to understand that by denying your sin, you are only lying and making matters worse for you. Your wickedness affects only a man like yourself. Time is running out. Admit to your sins and do it now. I am finished. Go now. Depart from me, you disgusting piece of humanity.
These were Job's friends. Remember that, okay? There is no response from Job here. But suddenly God speaks, and he has something to say to Job.
I have to use my deep God voice.
Brace yourself like a man, because from now on I will question you. Who do you think I am? Who created the seas, the sky, the ground, the animals, the vegetation, and everything you can see and touch? A mortal as yourself? No, it was me.
If you are a just God, release me from this suffering. How long will your anger last? What is the source of your anger? Have I not been faithful to you and your commands? Have I not given you the sacrifice you demand? Yet you unleash suffering on me that no one should have to bear. Where is your compassion for me? What must I do to make you hear my plea? I admit I have not lived a perfect life, but my punishment is far greater than my failures. Where, O God, is your mercy? I demand to be heard, and I demand an explanation for my punishment. I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I have appealed to you because I understand that the covenant you made with Noah gives me assurance that you will not rain down suffering on your people. But that is what you have done to me. Why? I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. I spoke once, but no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. I await your judgment on me. I know that my vindicator lives, whom I myself will see. My own eyes, no others shall behold me.
I will not submit to any court proceedings or allow myself to be questioned by mortals as yourself. There will be no trial, since I am the sole judge as to what is in a person's heart, and I alone pronounce guilt or innocence. Look, here is one of my creations, a beast as big as a giant pig. Must be a javelina. It shakes the earth when it walks, and it strikes terror in people's hearts when it roars. But the beast does what I command it to do, and it does not sin against me like humans do. Here is another of my creations, a beast with a long tail that can swipe a whole village away with one mighty stroke, and jaws that can sap a man into with one bite. But at my command, it becomes as docile as a baby. This is my creation, and you are free to live in it as long as you obey me and my commands. You whine and weep like a mortal. You are, and you expect those around you to join you in your misery. So what do you want me to do? You have interpreted the covenant I made with Noah correctly. I will not rain down suffering on my people. They do it to themselves. This was a test of your faith in me. Speak now, and I will listen.
Finally, Job repents, but does not say for what. This is directly out of the scripture.
I know that you can do all things. Surely I spoke of things that I did not understand. My ears have heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes.
Well, let's read chapter 42, 7 to 17 for the rest of the story. And let's give a hand to our primetime fighters. You all did a wonderful job. Well, let's finish the scripture and then we'll talk some more about it. So if you go to chapter 42, okay, we'll get to the end of Job. And I want to see if you like the ending as much as I do, okay? Chapter 42, we just heard Job basically how should I say it? Throw himself at the mercy of the court, right? All right? And after he does this, then God speaks, not God. After the Lord had said these things to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temite, I am angry with you and your 2 friends, because you have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. So now take 7 bulls and 7 rams, and go to my servant Job and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer, and not deal with you according to your folly. You have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. So Eliphaz, Temanite, Bildad, the Shuhite, and Zophar, the Naamathite, did what the Lord told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer. Looks like Job is coming out to be the hero here, right? After Job had prayed to his friends, the Lord made him prosperous again and gave him twice as much as he had before. All his brothers and sisters and everyone who had known him before came and ate with him in his house. They comforted and consoled him over the trouble the Lord had brought upon him, and each one gave him a piece of silver and a gold ring. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the first. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. The first daughter is named Jeminiah, the second Keziah, and the third Karin Hapuch. Nowhere in all the land were found women as beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father granted them an inheritance along with their brothers. Absolutely unheard of in that culture, that an inheritance would be granted to a daughter. The daughter had to go find a man to take care of her. That's the ending of Job, which I think makes my point that I said last week, that wisdom literature tends to favor women. Okay? And here's a perfect example of it in Job. After this, Job lived 140 years. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation, and so he died old and full of years. Well, that's Job. Okay? Does it make any sense to you after listening to our primetime players go through the little sketch we had?
Yeah.
And there's actually 3 rounds of this, of the 3 people challenging and questioning Job. So it's the greater part of the book of Job. So what I'd like to do, well, first of all, what I forgot to do was play a video. So I'm going to do that now, all right? And then we're going to go back and look at the text of Job, the real text, right? And see what we can deduce from that, and see if it makes sense to you now when we read it. How does that sound? All right. And then after the video, I have the story.
Book of Job. It's a profound and very unique book in the Bible for lots of reasons. The story is set in a very obscure land that's far away from Israel, Uz. The main character, Job, he's not even an Israelite, and the author, who's anonymous, doesn't even set the story in any clear period of ancient history. This all seems intentional, though. It's like the author doesn't want us to be distracted by historical questions, but rather to focus simply on the story of Job and on the questions raised by his experience of suffering. The book of Job has a very clear literary design. It opens and closes with a short narrative prologue and then an epilogue. And then the central body of the book is dense Hebrew poetry, representing conversations between Job and 4 dialogue partners called the Friends. These conversations are then concluded by a series of poetic speeches given by God to Job. Let's dive in and we'll just see how it works together. The prologue introduces us to Job, and we're told that he's a blameless, upright man who honors God. He's a super good guy. And then all of a sudden, we're transported into the heavenly realms, and God is holding court with his staff team. It's a very common image in the Old Testament describing how God runs the world. And among the heavenly beings is a figure called the Satan, which in Hebrew means the accuser or the prosecutor. And it's like we're watching a court scene. God presents Job as a truly righteous man, and then the accuser challenges God's policy of rewarding righteous people like Job. He says, the only reason Job obeys you is because because you bless him with prosperity. Let Job suffer, then we'll see how righteous he actually is. And then God agrees to let the accuser inflict suffering on Job. Now, it's at this point in the story that most of us go, what? Why did God do that? And then we assume that this book is going to answer that question, why God allows good people to suffer. But as you read on, the book doesn't answer that question. Nothing in the book ever answers that question. The prologue is setting up the real questions this book is trying to get at. Questions about God's justice and whether God operates the universe according to the strict principle of justice. And the response to those questions comes as you read through to the end of the book, not at the beginning. The ultimate reason for Job's suffering is simply never revealed. So the prologue concludes with a suffering and bewildered Job, who's rebuked by his wife, and he's approached by three friends who are going to try and provide wisdom and counsel. Their names are Eliphaz, the Temanite, Bildad, the Shuhite, and Zophar, the Naamathite. They're all non-Israelites like Job. And they represent the best of ancient Near Eastern thinking about God and suffering and the human condition, and this moves us into the main part of the book. First, Job speaks. And this is how this section of the book works. First, Job is going to speak, and then they'll follow a response from a friend. Then Job will respond to that friend. Then another friend will respond to Job's response, and so on back and forth for 3 cycles. And this whole debate is focused on 3 questions. Is God truly just in character? And does God run the universe on the strict principle of justice? And if so, then how is Job's suffering to be explained? As we're going to see, Job and the friends, they're working from a huge assumption about what God's justice ought to look like in the world. Namely, that every single thing that happens in the universe should operate according to the strict principle of justice. So if you're a wise, good person and you honor God, good things will happen to you. God will reward you. But if you're evil and stupid and do sinful things, bad things will happen to you. God will punish you. Now, Job's constant argument throughout his speeches is this. First of all, that he's innocent, and so the implication of that is that his suffering is not a divine punishment. Now we know from the prologue, both of these things are true. Remember, God himself said, Job is righteous and blameless. And so Job concludes his argument by accusing God. God either doesn't run the world according to justice, or even worse, God himself is simply unjust. The friends, on the other hand, they beg to differ. Their argument is that God is just, the implication being that God always runs the world according to justice in this way, and so they conclude by accusing not God, but Job. Job must have done something really, really bad for God to punish him like this. They even start making up possible sins that Job must have committed. Job protests to all of this. In fact, he gets so fed up with the friends that he eventually just gives up on them. He takes up his case directly with God. Now, something to be aware of is that Job, he's on an emotional roller coaster in these poems. He used to think that God is just, but now he can't reconcile that with his suffering. And so in some outbursts, Job, he'll accuse God of being a bully. Once he even declares that God has orchestrated all the injustice in the world. But the moment he utters that thought, he's terrified of it because he wants to hope and believe that God is truly just. Job is all over the place in this section. And so he makes one last statement of his innocence, and then he demands that God show up personally to explain himself. Now it's at this point that a surprise friend shows up, Elihu the Buzite. Now, he's not an Israelite, but he does have a Hebrew name. And Elihu, he has the same assumption as Job and the friends. He argues that God is just, and that implies that God always operates the universe according to justice. But then Elihu draws a more sophisticated conclusion about why good people suffer. It may not be punishment for sin in the past. God might inflict suffering as a warning to help people avoid sin in the future. Or God might use pain and suffering to build character or to teach people valuable lessons. Elihu doesn't claim to know why Job is suffering, but one thing he is certain of. Job is wrong to accuse God of being unjust. Job doesn't even respond to Elihu, and the dialogues come to a close. It's like the wisdom of the ancients has been spent, and the mystery remains. And then, all of a sudden, God shows up in a whirlwind, and he responds to Job personally. He first responds to Job's accusation that he's unjust and incompetent at running the universe. So God takes Job on a virtual tour of the universe, and he starts asking him all these questions about the order and origins of the cosmos. Was Job ever around when God architected the earth or organized the constellations? Has Job ever commanded the sunrise or controlled the weather? God has his eyes on all of these cosmic details that Job has never even conceived of. Then God starts going into detail describing the grazing habits of mountain goats and how deer give birth, or the feeding patterns of lions and wild donkeys. What's the point of all this? Remember the assumption of Job and his friends about what it looks like for God to run the world according to justice. Underneath that assumption is a deeper one, that Job and his friends have a wide enough perspective on life to make such a claim about how God ought to run the world. And God's response with this virtual tour, it deconstructs all of these assumptions. It first of all shows that the universe is a vast, complex place, and that God has his eyes on all of it, every detail. Job, on the other hand, has only the small horizon of his life experience to draw from. His view of the world is very limited. And so what looks like divine injustice, from Job's point of view, needs to be seen in an infinitely larger context. Job is simply not in a position to make such a huge accusation about God. After the virtual tour, God asks Job if he would like to micromanage the world for a day, according to the strict principle of justice that Job and his friends assume, punishing every evil deed of every person at every moment with precise retribution. The fact is that carrying out justice in a world like ours, it's extremely complex. It's never black and white, like Job and the friends seem to think. Which leads to God's last point. He starts describing these two fantastic creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan, which some people think are poetic depictions of a hippo and a crocodile. But more likely they refer to well-known creatures from ancient Near Eastern mythology that are used elsewhere in the Bible as symbols of the disorder and danger that exist in God's good world. These creatures, they're not evil. God's actually quite proud of them, but they're not safe either. The point is that God's world is amazing and very good, but it's not perfect or always safe. God's world has order and beauty, but it's also wild and sometimes dangerous, just like these two fantastic creatures. And so we come back to the big question of Job's suffering. Why is there suffering in God's world? Whether it's from earthquakes or wild animals or from other humans, God doesn't explain why. What he says is that we live in an extremely complex, amazing world that at this stage, at least, is not designed to prevent suffering. And that's God's response. Job challenged God's justice. God responds that Job doesn't have sufficient knowledge about our universe to make such a claim. Job demanded a full explanation from God, and what God asked Job for is trust in his wisdom and character. And so, Job responds with humility and repentance. He apologizes for accusing God, and he acknowledges that he's overstepped his bounds. Then all of a sudden, the book concludes with a short epilogue. First, God says that the friends were wrong, that their ideas about God's justice were just too simple, not true to the complexity of the world or God's wisdom. And then God says that Job has spoken rightly about him. Now this is surprising because it can't apply to everything Job said. I mean, we know Job drew hasty and wrong conclusions, but God still approves of Job's wrestling, how Job came honestly before God with all of his emotion and pain and simply wanted to talk to God himself. And God says that's the right way to process through all of this, through the struggle of prayer. The book concludes with Job having his health, his family, his wealth all restored, not as a reward for good behavior, but simply as a generous gift from God, and that's the end of the book. So the book of Job, it doesn't unlock the puzzle of why bad things happen to good people. Rather, it does invite us to trust God's wisdom when we do encounter suffering, rather than try and figure out the reasons for it. When we search for reasons, we tend to either simplify God like the friends, or like Job, accuse God, but based on limited evidence. And so the book is inviting us to honestly bring our pain and our grief to God, and to trust that God actually cares and that he knows what he's doing. And that's what the book of Job is all about.
Very nice quick summary.
Book of Job. We don't need to watch it 2 times. Okay. I got to get out of here without tripping over. There we go. My teaching style when I was teaching was this. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them, and then tell them what you told them. the video was telling you what we talked about in this little skit, right? Sometimes it's better to make a mistake, because I was going to play this in the beginning, and then afterwards I thought, no, I'm going to play it at the end, because I think it'll make more sense to you. Job is an extremely complex book. I mean, I would rather teach the four Gospels than trying to teach Job, because it's so complex. But it's such a powerful book, right? And it's got many lessons in it. It doesn't answer the question, why bad things happen to good people, which is one of our, questions that I think we all ask, right? So, here's what I'd like to do now, and we don't have, we got about a half an hour. I'd like to go into the text, but first we're going to have a little bit of levity here, okay? I came across this story I kind of like, as we live in the desert. It's a traveler was stumbling through the desert, desperate for water, and he saw something far off in the distance. Hoping to find water, he walked towards the image, only to find a little old peddler sitting at a card table with a bunch of ties laid out for sale. The parched wanderer asked, "Please, I'm dying of thirst. Can I have some water?" The man replied, "I don't have any water, but why don't you buy a tie? Here's one that goes nicely with your clothes." The desperate man shouted, "I don't want a tie, you nut. I need water." "Okay, don't buy a tie, but to show you that I'm a nice guy, I'll tell you that over that hill, about 5 miles, is a nice restaurant. Walk that way and they'll give you all the water you want." The man thanked the peddler and walked away toward the hill and eventually disappeared out of sight. 3 hours later, he turned to the table where the man sat with the ties. The man at the card table asked, "I told you about 5 miles over that hill. Couldn't you find it?" "I found it all right. They wouldn't serve me without a tie." Sometimes it pays to buy what you don't need. All right, let's we'll get into it here. Just hang on. Let's go to chapter 3, okay? And I want to just start out there. We won't read the whole chapter. I just want to point out a couple of things to you. And this is after Job has been afflicted with all of losing his property, everything, and he's got these boils all over him, and he's sitting on this ash heap, and his 3 friends have come to him, okay? And then Job speaks, chapter 3, verse 1. It says, "After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. He said, 'May the day of my birth perish.' In the night it was said, 'A boy is born.' That day may it turn to darkness. May God above not care about it. May no light shine upon it." Job is very distressed, right? And then if we go down in the text to verse 11, there's 5 whys that Job asks, okay? Why did I'm chapter 3, verse 11 now. "Why did I not perish at birth and die as I came from the womb? Why were there knees to receive me and breasts that might be nursed?" And then verse 16, "Or why was I not hidden in the ground like a stillborn child, like an infant who never saw the light of day?" You see how anguished Job is? And then verse 20, "Why is light given to those in misery and life to the bitter of soul?" And then verse 23, "Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? For sighing comes to me instead of food. My groans pour out like water." You can see Job pouring out his misery, right? And his disgust, essentially, with his life and where he's at. And who wouldn't feel that way, right? I would, right? I would certainly be upset. And then the next start is the first of the series of 3 questionings by Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. we're not going to go through all of those, okay? I'm just going to point out a couple of verses, okay? Chapter 4, verse 7, and this is Eliphaz now. And he says, "Consider now, who being innocent has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed?" So he's saying to Job, Job, you did something wrong, very wrong, okay? Because God doesn't punish those who have done things right. And Eliphaz goes on, okay, and then he talks about this dream. Remember, it was in the skip, verse 12, okay? "A word was secretly brought to me, my ears caught a whisper of it amid disquieting dreams in the night when deep sleep falls on men. Fear and trembling seized me and made all my bones shake. A spirit gilded past my face and the hair on my body stood on end." This was again from his dream, all right? And then Eliphaz goes on, chapter 5, verse 8. "But if it were I would appeal to God. I would lay my cause before him. He performs wonders that cannot be fathomed." So Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar continually try to get Job to admit that he's done something wrong. And Job won't do it because he hasn't done anything wrong, all right? And then chapter 5, verse 13, he catches the wise in their craftiness, and the schemes of the wily are swept away. So he's accusing Job of being a crafty, wily, deceitful person, right? Obviously, it doesn't go down real well. Because then Job answers chapter 6, all right? And Job, in chapter 6, verse 4, "The arrows of the Almighty are in me. My spirit drinks in their poison. God's terrors are marshaled against me." Job wants to die. He's full of poisoned arrows from God, and he's at wit's end. He wants to die. Okay? Does this make more sense now? Okay. All right. And then, if we go on, you'll find all three of these cycles, okay? And I'm going to skip over, okay, to chapter 7, verse 12, okay? Chapter 7, verse 12. And Job is speaking to God here. "Am I the sea or the monster of the deep that you put me under guard? When I think my bed will comfort me and my couch will ease my complaint, even then you frighten me with dreams and terrify me with visions." Job is very in anguish, okay? And then Bildad has his turn, and he questions Job some more, right? In chapter 8, verse 6, it says, "If you are pure and upright, even now he will rouse himself on your behalf and restore you to your rightful place." So Bildad is promising something that he can't deliver. And yet that's what he believes, okay? And then verse 13, Bildad says, "Such is the destiny of all those who forget God. So perishes the hope of the godless." And then verse 20, "Surely God does not reject the blameless man or strengthen the hands of evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy." I doubt that Job probably believed that. And then Job replies to Bildad. Okay, chapter 19. He starts out by saying, "Indeed, I know that this is true, but how can a mortal be righteous before God?" And then 15, he says, "Though I were innocent, I would not answer him. I would only plead my judge for mercy." So Job is continuing to maintain his innocence and continuing to plead with God to relieve him of his misery. So that's the whole cycle of Job. There will be 3 cycles of Job's friends questioning him. Okay? and Job reply. All right? And then chapter 11, Zophar has his turn. All right? And he doesn't say too much. He says on verse 4, "You say to God, my beliefs are flawless, and I am pure in your sight. Oh, how I wish that God would speak, that he would open his lips against you and disclose to you the secrets of wisdom." So he's trying to convince Job to have wisdom. And then Job replies on chapter 12, verse 1, "Doubtless you are the people, and wisdom will die with you. But I have a mind as well as you. I am not inferior to you. Who does not know these things?" Now, I'm going to skip over all the others, because if you go through this now and you look for the 3 cycles of Bildad and Zophar and Eliphaz, you won't find the 3rd one for Zophar. If you go to chapter 27, right, there's actually a mistake in the text. Just go to 27. And if you actually go to 26, 26 has Job's response to the 3rd questioning of Bildad. Okay? And then you get to the end of 26, verse 14. We jump right into 27, and it says, Job continued his discourse. Zophar hasn't spoken to him yet. Right? And the reason for that is it's out of order. To get Zophar's 3rd speech, you have to go to chapter 27, right? Verses 13 to 23. So if I were you, I'd make a little notation in my Bible, okay, that chapter 27, verses 13 to 23 need to be moved to the very end of chapter 26. They didn't have word processors in those days, so it wasn't easy to fix a problem like this, right? Did everyone understand that? Okay.
Where did you say to move it to?
Right before chapter 27. Yeah. And then it makes sense. Then you have Zophar speaking, and then Job continuing his discourse. He's responding. All right? Now, I want to fast forward a little bit here. I want to get some of Elihu's response, okay? And Julie, you did a really nice job of representing Elihu. And you would have closed the sale, right? All right. If we would continue reading, okay, at the end of chapter 31, all right, chapter 31, at the end, the very end, the words of Job are ended, it says. Right? So he's been through 3 cycles now with these 3 friends, okay, who came to comfort him when he was hurting and then trying to get him to admit that he had done something wrong, right? And then this Elihu steps into the picture. And Elihu is young. All right? He's not old, so he's not wise according to the norms of that culture. But he's been listening to this, and he's just burning to step in and say what he needs to say. Right? And so he starts out, we won't read the first part of the verse 6. All right? I am young in years, and you are old. That is why I was fearful, not daring to tell you what I know. I thought, age should speak, advanced years should teach wisdom, but it is the Spirit in a man, the breath of the Almighty, that gives him understanding. It is not the only old who are wise, not only the aged who understand what is right. He just stepped on his tongue, okay? Because that would not be tolerated in that culture. Young were not to override what the old person had said for his saying, okay? And then he goes on, verse 12. I gave you my full attention, but not one of you has proved Job wrong. None of you has answered his arguments. Do not say, we have found wisdom. Let God refute him, not man. But Job has not marshaled his words against me, and I will not answer him with your arguments. So Elihu comes in and he turns the tables on what these other three are trying to do to Job because he thinks he can get the job done. And it goes on and on and on with Elihu. You can read that on your own, all right? But he goes on, and he doesn't make much progress with Job. Same as the other three people. And then it goes on, chapter 33, verse 32, he's speaking to Job. And he says, if you have anything to say to me, answer me, speak up, for I want you to be clear. He's actually trying to be on Job's side to get him to admit that he's done something wrong. Okay? All right. That's kind of a real quick run-through of Job.
Yeah.
I'm hoping, and if my goal is met, my goal would be that you could now go back and read Job and make some sense out of it. That you understand that there's the prologue where Job gets, is struck by this Satan, and God make this deal, all right, to inflict Job with suffering. And then the middle, which is the 3 rounds of questioning between Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. And then when that ends, Elihu takes over, right? And he doesn't get the job done. And then God comes in and speaks to Job. And then the very last part of Job is the epilogue, where all of his fortunes are restored. Make any sense to you?
Lots of sense.
You think you can read it now and try to... Yes, Reverend Judy.
I've read Job several times, and I get what you're saying. But it seems to me, right at the get-go, Job has committed the very first and greatest sin, and that's a sin of pride.
Yeah, good point.
And he doesn't admit it because I don't think he recognizes it as such.
That's a very good point. Yeah. Anybody have any observations?
What about Job's wife? She lost her children.
Yeah, that too. Yep.
She's just a little side.
All right. We're within 5 minutes. I thought I might have time to take a look at one of the parables of Jesus, but we're not going to do that. We've had enough today. Next week, I might just kind of change the venue a little bit, all right? I would like to get started in Proverbs, but before I do that, we're probably going to do a little exercise with the Psalms, all right? And have you all read some Psalms and see if you can categorize them as to what genre that Psalm would be. And some of the Psalms that are in the list that I put together will be wisdom Psalms. So I think that's what we'll do next week. And then hopefully start into Proverbs. And if that doesn't work, we'll look at some parables of Jesus. It's kind of getting a break from the wisdom literature, right? That's sort of the game plan. I appreciate you all coming back, all right? Well, it's always good when you're the instructor or the teacher to see your students come back, right? And I don't do a perfect job. I do the best I can. And I hope in some ways that I helped you take interest in the wisdom literature and the book of Job. I know I've learned a lot preparing this lesson, and I hope you have too. Yes?
I have a question now. The book of Job the authorship is a foreigner. Are there any other books in the Bible that are written by a foreigner?
that I'm aware of. No. Yeah, that's a good point. He wasn't an Israelite, and none of the players were Israelites. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And Job, the book of Job is actually considered in the literary community as one of the greatest masterpieces of literature, okay? So it's got high marks, all right? But I know when I first opened it up and tried to read it, I couldn't make any sense out of it until I understood the structure. And then it started to make sense to me. But there's a lot in it, believe me. It's a very complex book. And if you have a study Bible like I have, and you have all the references to other texts in the Bible, you spend a lifetime just reading Job. Yeah, I think I told you this story when I was out at San Martin, and it was announced that I was going to teach a Bible study class. And this guy came up to me as way out from Mass, and he said, "I don't need your class." He said, "I know everything there is to know about the Bible." And Reverend Judy said this, "You just met Jesus." Nobody knows everything there is to know about the Bible, believe me. There are biblical scholars who will spend their entire career on just the Gospels, or maybe one Gospel. It's a very complex book. But it's I find it, the more I learn about it, the more intriguing it is, and the more I learn about life and life's lessons. Okay. Job doesn't teach us that bad things won't happen to good people. It's not the message, right? So we need to remind ourselves of that. All right, enough. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Have a great week.